your neighborhood advocacy matters. Your consumer dollar is more powerful than you give it value for. If you have found a product that someone talked about online and your grocery store doesn't have it, ask them to carry it for you. Many of them will give you case discounts even, right? There's a particular type of apple that I like. My particular grocery store in Colorado wasn't carrying it in an organic form. I asked them to carry it in an organic form. You just have to advocate for yourself and realize that food is the most powerful medicine that we have yet to discover. Welcome to the Hope and Help podcast, where we talk about science and science-based tools for fatigue and chronic illness. Normally, guys, I'm your host. I'm Haylie Pomroy. You know me as a #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Fast Metabolism Diet, health and wellness expert. I'm a PhD student. You guys know this. I'm also a fierce advocate for those in need of a little bit of help and hope. But today we're going to flip things around a little bit. I'm actually going to be interviewed. The community has asked a lot about who am I? Where did I come from? How did I get here? And maybe you guys have seen me before. I've been interviewed by Dr. Oz, by George Stephanopoulos on Good Morning America, by Katie Couric. But if you really want to know about me and who I am and why I do what I do, I invited the brilliant Dr. Jacqueline Junco to interview me. She's a dear friend and a colleague, someone I feel intimately comfortable with talking about, who I am and what I do. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Junco today. And Jackie, you can ask me anything.
All right, Haylie, thank you so much. And I want to start by just saying, I think your fund of knowledge is amazing. And I think this is going to be a great podcast for those out there who need to hear things on nutrition. And I chose nutrition because that's your forte. And I am passionate about nutrition. Nutrition, according to Hippocrates, back in those days, he said, with nutrition, you could heal everything. So on that note, let's get started. Let's begin by just telling me a little bit how you got started with nutrition and why nutrition has been your passion.
Great question. So I actually grew up all my life wanting to become a veterinarian. I've got my mom saved some artwork that I did in kindergarten of me doctoring what looked like some pretty sick dogs. I actually applied to vet school. I got an alternate position my junior year of college. So I got advanced admission. And then I got really, really sick. I hemorrhaged after a routine tonsillectomy at 19. And they thought, they were running like, did she have hemophilia? What was going on? She had some sort of bleeding disorder. I was actually ultimately diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder called ITP. I had my first degree in agriculture and soil sciences. I took a medical leave of absence. I did not go to vet school. I went back and got a minor in biochemistry. And I decided, I would love to say that it was just for fun. I kind of got backed into a wall medically. The medication that I was put on was Imurin and Cellcept, rotating those, which are anti-rejection drugs. Right. So immune suppressants, B-cell suppressants. And then I was on about 60 to 80 milligrams of prednisone every day. Oh, wow. And it allowed me to function and still ride horses, but I wasn't well. And then I got a strep infection in my right kidney and I ended up hospitalized. And it's so weird because I always say I remember what it smelled like, what it sounded like. I always remember the buttons on your hospital gown, making indentions into my legs. And I just remember going this cannot be my future. This just can't. And it was that moment where I said, I've got to learn how to reverse engineer what the hell is wrong with me. And so I went on a journey. I always say it takes you a lot of effort to stay healthy, but getting healthy after a healing or a health crisis is a journey. And on that journey, I've met amazing people and created amazing colleagues. But what I learned was that every single thing that was wrong with my body was nutrient dependent. Wow. And every path to heal my body was nutrient dependent. So it was just kind of this, I'd love to say I always thought food was cool. I didn't. I didn't like it. I didn't want it. And it was thrusted upon me and it saved my life.
Wow, that's amazing. What a beautiful story.
Hey guys, it's Haylie Pomroy, your host. Right about now, you're probably struggling to achieve the health that you deserve, and you're just not sure what you need to do in order to get it. So what I've done is I've created a special link for you that will give you the nutrition and supplement programs that I use in my private practice to achieve amazing results for my clients and my community. Go to HayliePomroy.com/podcast. Plus, when you use that link, you'll get a 20% discount just because I love you. Again, that's HayliePomroy.com/podcast. Now, back to the episode.
Being that we deal with chronically ill patients and patients that are immunosuppressed and immunocompromised and very similar to your story and different notes. But what do you think are the major things that they suffer with nutritionally?
So it's kind of cool. Like I've built many integrative medicine clinics. I've sold many clinics. I always believed in a clinic without walls, right? So I wanted to integrate with so many different people. But then when I came to INIM, when I came to the Institute of Neuro-Immune Medicine, it was like this really cool, I want to say alchemization, and like this alchemy of so many different ideas and philosophies without judgment coming together under one roof, right? I mean, there's some real opposing ideas and some real synergistic ideas, and all of them are embraced with such reverence because it's whatever's best for the patient. So you guys all embraced, obviously nutrition. I had, in the clinics that I had built, I had done all different aspects of natural health. But the thing that I find, and it was true with me, so my goal is to shorten the gap, right, between me having a health crisis and me having a massive health victory, is to shorten the gap of how hard it was for me to get from point A to point B for everybody I ever come into contact virtually, digitally, or in person. And so when people walk through the doors of INM, I'm like, hi, I know you.
Right.
I mean, people would say, you just seem so familiar. And I go, yeah, because our cells on some level like resonate with one another, right? But the common thing that I see is that they're in a homeostasis of a disease state, and that it requires what I like to call hormetic events, or events with nutrition infusion, maybe nutraceutical infusion, maybe acupuncture infusion. There needs to be a positive infusion that allows the body to elevate its level of homeostasis to wellness. So when we have disease, we are in a state of homeostasis. Even with chronic degenerative disease, right? The body is still operating and functioning. We're still alive. And so we have to pour in to those bodies, and we have to pour into those patients. And emotionally, oftentimes we have to convince those patients that they're ready and deserving to receive. That's the commonality.
So how would you bridge that gap?
I'm a big protocol girl. I am not a theory girl. Like, theory was not going to get me out of the hospital, right? I had massive damage to my right kidney. I was told I could no longer tolerate prednisone. So my choice was to get a splenectomy and IV chemotherapeutics. Like, that was the next step. And I went, yeah, no, you know what I mean? Just not going to happen.
Right.
That was just not going to be my story. So I'm very protocol driven. I believe, and so I have dyslexia, and so I always have a strategy and a plan. So there's a couple things. One, I built a community, an online community where people could go and feel not judged, ask anything. I'll tell them it's either none of your business, I don't know, or I'll tell you the truth. And it could be about my hair being gray or my period's not working or whatever it is, right? No judgment. So it's to have this place where you can go and ask questions and not feel judged. What I hear from my community all the time is that they're so medically gaslit, and it's gotten worse, in my opinion, since the pandemic.
I agree.
And they're so devalued in the experience that they're having in their health and wellness. And they're almost judged selfish for having a desire to be better, right? So I think community first. I think a plan, because I'm a scientist, right? If we're going to implement a change in nutrition, we need to have biomarkers that tell us whether what we did was good or bad. Because there is no one-size-fits-all program for anybody. Period.
That was going to be my next question.
Ain't going to happen. Right.
Yeah.
So we need to have a strategy and a plan. Like in my world of nutrition, I train coaches. It's very funny because also in publishing books, publishers tell you do one diet and, write it to victory. In teaching coaches, do one protocol and write it to victory. My level 1 coaches learn 18 different programs and a flow chart of how to know what program would be best for that unique body. I don't believe in one size fits all. And it's probably not the smartest business decision you'll ever hear. That's why we have to have the community. It's why we have to have biodiversity in our nutrition plans. And it's why we have to expect better clinical, this is my expectation. I expect better clinical results than any drug on the market could potentially deliver, because everything is nutrient dependent and any pharmacological intervention is nutrient dependent on whether you have success or side effects. So I have massive expectations of a food and nutrition and lifestyle program, right? I don't think you can eat your way out of a bad situation. You have to modify the lifestyle as well. I think it needs to be customized to the person. And I think there needs to be a system to show true success. And I'll throw one more gauntlet down. And I dare anybody to go against me on this one.
Oh boy.
There is no place in the conversation of metabolism, metabolic healing, reduction of inflammation, and lack of eating. So I am not a fasting advocate at all.
You mentioned inflammation. So what role do you think inflammation plays, or what role do you think foods play in mitigating some of the inflammatory responses that we see in our patients?
Right. So I think that there are foods that are actually pro-inflammatory. I don't fall into the belief system that nightshades are pro-inflammatory for all bodies. I think that first we have to maybe define food, right? Yellow number 5, right? Red 6, blue 7, tartarazine. That's not food, period, right? So we kind of need to take all of that. I think all of it needs to come out of the grocery store, quite frankly, and put back in the hardware store where it was originally supposed to be. It has zero place in a food store. So the first thing when I'm looking and assessing a person that's in any disease state or wants to just prevent, like it takes a ton of effort to stay healthy and it takes an eclectic journey to get healthy, right? So first we have to define what food is. And pretty much if you can't eat it, don't put it on your body. Don't wrap yourself in it before you go to bed, right? So you need biodegradable, healthy products, and definitely don't swallow it. After that, we want to look at, I'm a big advocate of diversity in food. One is to evoke positive hormetic events. We talked about a hormetic event being something that entices the body to stay out of the status quo. So I believe in altering the glycemic value or the way in which the body metabolizes sugar, the fiber value, the protein value, the fat value. And we know that we cannot re-inoculate our gut microbiome without having diversity in our diet every 2 to 3 days. There is more research on re-inoculating, not taking something for transient benefit, but truly scrubbing and enriching the soil of our gut and growing healthy gut microbiome requires diversity in food. And if we eat the same foods every day, we inhibit our body from having a good garden in our gut, right? Remember my first degrees in agricultural and soil sciences.
It fits right in.
It fits right in.
Totally.
The other piece of that is there is no species in captivity, and we're all in captivity, right? If you look around, there's no species in captivity that we don't, in order to keep them alive, have to heavily supplement. And there is no soil that is grown on this earth that is robust without quote unquote supplementation, whether that's by composting or putting eggshells in your soil or using Miracle-Gro or something of that nature. So I think acknowledging that we need help to do well in our health and that we're nutrient dependent and that food should not be called things that come from the hardware store. I mean, we have additives and preservatives that are meant to strengthen the hull of a battleship. They were created industrially, right? To inhibit bombs and bullets from penetrating the hull of a ship. And they are put into our food. And
patients and people still eat that.
Right.
And consume that. So how do you promote them not taking it, or how do you educate people on that?
Right. So a couple things that we do is we make a list of things that we definitely know will not get you healthy. I don't like to look at foods like, don't do that, it's bad for you. I just say, what's our goal? Our goal is to change your current status of homeostasis, right? You're alive. Thank God, you're here. How do we take you up a level or 10? And the first thing that we want to do is not engage in things that are going to cause you to go down a level. So there's things that we just know aren't good for us if we're trying to heal. Like people say, I'm not an advocate for coffee, for example, when I'm trying to heal somebody's metabolism. I'm not an advocate for gluten. And I had a great conversation with our pharmacologist about that, how gluten isn't just this trendy thing that we should all avoid, but it actually reduces cysteine in the body significantly. It binds to cysteine, which is how we produce glutathione, which is how we detoxify, which is how we don't have antioxidant damage in our body. So first we want to just say, hey, let's see what you're doing. Let's see what's helping. Let's see what's hurting. And let's double down on what's helping. So I use the word coffee. And if an individual says, but I can't give up my coffee, I said, well, then let's make your coffee have a positive impact to try to counteract some of the potential negative impact. So we'll add little sneaky things in like roasted dandelion root, right, into a coffee. People don't notice that it's there, but it has some adrenal, some stress hormone tonification. It helps build the blood, enriches the B cells, right? So that we don't say, I tell all my coaches that I'm training that in this space, because our bodies are amazingly resilient, 70% is an A. It's an A+. So if your clients make an improvement in their diet, 70%, you are going to have profound clinical results. And there's so much judgment so I believe the word diet means did I eat today? DIET, to achieve whatever it is you want. Whether that's running faster, jumping higher, right? Did I eat today? And what is going to be the outcome and the consequence?
I guess the outcome would be, depends what you eat today, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So
I
that's
just
how
wanted
you
to ask you a
establish your
question
diet. Yeah.
because when you mentioned coffee
Yeah.
and adding the dandelion, what do you think about MCT oil?
So I'm an advocate of MCT oil. We have a protein powder that we use when we're working with hormone disharmony in the body, and it has MCT in it. I think it's really good with hormone dysfunction. I think it's really good from an inflammatory perspective. I don't like it heated. We use it in our phase 3 powder, so our powder that works specifically on hormone dysfunction from an inflammatory perspective. And I love it clinically. But great question.
How about gluten? Let's go back to gluten.
Right.
So what do you think about gluten? Because I know there's a lot of talks about European gluten is different. I know myself, when I went to Europe and I would eat a croissant, I wouldn't feel as miserable as I feel if I have a croissant here. So why do you think that is?
So I'm going to take you back to the ag piece of things. There's a couple things that we do in our industrialized farming. One is that we've hybridized, right, wheat, specifically red wheat, significantly, so that it actually has a higher gluten content. The other thing that we do is we used a term called enriched. It's a real sneaky term, right? It means that it's legally not able to be sold to the American population unless you put riboflavin in it, because it is so nutrient devoid. So they enrich it, right, with a singular nutrient, and then they glutenize it to make it more stretchy and doughy. So let's say your flour has a certain level of gluten. In the processing, they extract gluten, probably from your gluten-free products, right? Or from a hybridized red wheat is one of the more common. And they spray it with gluten so that it's more stretchy and it's more doughy. Because white flour, they've taken all the nutrients away from it, right? Probably sold it to you in the supplement bottle. They've stripped it. They've added riboflavin, so it's legally allowed to be sold, but it would be like cardboard. So then they glutenize it. And now it is this lovely, fluffy white bread that everybody just loves, and it's stretchy and it rises. So I'm not genetically celiac, but I do have an autoimmune disorder and a positive ANA titer. And one of the things that they find with individuals that have positive ANA titers and positive sedimentation or sed rates is that the glycoprotein in gluten can be a catalyst for the body's autoantibodies. So my suggestion is anybody with a positive ANA, so especially like in Hashimoto's thyroiditis, if you have a positive antithyroid antibody or thyroid peroxidase. I mean, like I just go, gluten doesn't exist in your world. It's not even like
I always
maybe.
recommend to our patients, all of them, I say, try just go gluten-free, see if your symptoms get better.
Right.
But it's so hard for people to say, oh, what am I going to do? I love bread. And there is great alternatives
There
now.
is, but you got to watch it because a lot of those alternative breads have a ton of genetically modified corn and a ton of soy, which is also a catalyst, especially if there is an endocrine aspect to their health and wellness. So if they love bread and pasta, and so this is what I always say, I pretend all my life that I've owned this whole collection of magic wands. And I always say, you have a magic wand. What do you crave? What do you love? What makes you happy? Because remember, pleasure stimulates the metabolism. Endorphins during eating elevates not only your upper GI, pancreatic enzymes, the collection of bile salts in the gallbladder. I'm thinking about good food, the dopamine, right? The salivary enzymes and those dopamines really help inoculate the gut microbiome. So pleasure stimulates the metabolism. So I try to identify what they love and then I make that healthy. So we always focus first. Like sometimes people have this philosophy, these nutrition philosophies that they say like, I don't know, beets are the best thing in the world, right? Or walnuts, all should have walnuts. You know what I mean? Everybody should have a walnut and you will cure all that ails you. Find what your patient loves and then make a healthy version of that and tell them to double down on it. So if someone loves bread and pasta, I mean, I love cheeses. I have an autoimmune disorder. I do not do the glycoprotein that's found in dairy at all. First of all, the casein also suppresses cysteine. I don't utilize glutathione very well. I'm homozygous methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. So I don't methylate well. I am not going to put a casein, glycoprotein with casein in it. It's just going to do nothing but suppress my cysteine, right? So dairy's done, but I love cheeses. So I made a digital cookbook, right? And it's got cream cheese and cottage cheese, and it's all dairy-free. And it's got cheesecake, it's shredded cheese, and it actually tastes good. It doesn't taste like plastic. It was something that I wanted to master because I had the capacity to use my magic wand and actually love what I'm eating. That's important because it's sustainable then.
Hey guys, it's Haylie, your host. I wanted to bring to your attention the possibility of coming in and doing a study with us. It is called the COVID-UPP Study, and UP stands for Understanding the Post-Viral Phase. You have to be local in South Florida. There are 2 phases of this study. Let me give you the phone number. It's 305-275-5450. And the email is INIMresearch@nova.edu. We are currently looking for patients that are dealing with post-COVID, long COVID. We have 2 phases of that study. Please contact us and see if this could be an opportunity for you to get the care and information that you need.
Hola, soy la doctora Ana Palacio, de la Universidad de Miami. Me encantó participar en el podcast de hoy y quería invitarlos a considerar el estudio COVID-UPP. Este estudio está tratando de determinar por qué las personas no mejoran después de COVID. Si les interesa saber más de este estudio, por favor llamen al número 305-275-5450 o pueden escribir al email INIMresearch@nova.edu. Les agradezco mucho su interés y los vemos la próxima vez.
I was vegan for a long time, so I'm very
Savvy.
good. Yes, especially with making good cheesecakes and good things, make them taste good. I mean, you don't want to give up the good tasting foods.
It's
things
not
that you
sustainable.
love. Right.
First of all, life is hard enough.
Right.
We have to eat. Again, every single thing we do is nutrient dependent, right? So if you have disdain for what you're eating, I was working on a film one time, actually with Reese Witherspoon. I can say this because she was out and open about it. They called me in because she loves food. She loves healthy food. And they had a person from the studio that had come in, and I walked into the kitchen and it looked like the rejects from Southwest Airline diet food, right? And she was in tears and she's just going, I have to do this film. I can't eat this. And I was like, put everything off the table. We had a massive, she and one of her assistants and I went out to Air One. We had a massive shopping spree, right? We had a blast. We made amazing foods. Those are recipes that she fed the kids. She fed her company when they came over. That's sustainable, right? So whether it's a professional athlete, somebody that makes their money being in front of the camera, writing, directing, they are financially motivated and inspired, right, to have peak performance from their body. I like to take those same exact principles and use them on individuals that are dealing with chronic disease, because it takes that same kind of intensity of healing and repair to maximize what their body has the actual capacity to do.
I just find it so hard when you mention, our patient population with chronic disease. You see these patients over and over. They've been sick for so many years. And every time you talk to them about nutrition, you see that they're not in the right path. They eat foods with a lot of preservatives.
They're exhausted.
And they're tired.
And it's expensive.
So what would be the solution? Because, a lot of them say, well, I don't know where, I don't have energy to make my food. I can't cook for myself.
Right.
What should I do? I just go and get one of those quick microwavable meals, stick them in the microwave. It's easy.
Right.
But it's so bad for you.
It's so bad for you.
What would you recommend for our patients who are too tired to make a meal?
So I tell every one of our coaches, and this is what we do free challenges every month. We do 2 a month. So what we do is we do 14-day, 7-day, 30-day, different types of nutrition challenges. So you sign up, you come in, we give you free recipes. All our coaches are on there. They talk you through the process. They give you tips. They give you ideas. This is my charge to the coaches that I train. It is your job and responsibility, if you're going to take financial compensation, right? And our challenges are free, and they all jump in there and they all help. It's part of their requirement for getting their certification. We have ones that you can use products, shakes and stuff. You can buy those. We have ones that you do not need anything, and you can go in and learn all kinds of cooking. We have cooking tips. We have how to do Epsom salts, how to do alternate nostril breathing, how to dry skin brush. We talk about easy. I'm a big, don't fill your freezer with packaged foods. Fill your freezer with foods you've packaged, right? So I am huge at keeping it simple and making it simple. So the requirement is when someone coaches or is in our community is for them to walk away with a sense of relief. You've had a victory. I want them to feel like they're solving their food problem is easier because they've engaged with us. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've learned some tips and tricks, right? So that's our ultimate goal. You should not walk away from visiting any nutritionist, in my opinion, and feel overwhelmed or overburdened, because it takes baby steps. And some people are ready to crawl and some people are ready to run. And exactly where you're at is perfect, right? Food can impact you with very little change. You can have a massive impact with very little change and adjustment. And it's the consistency of it. So we've got to make it sustainable for the patient. We're not talking about look, I'd like you to do this. Like I said, do beet powder for the next 3 weeks and your life is going to be cured. I love beets. I eat beets all the time. But it's got a very powerful antioxidant nutrients in it. Helps with nitric oxide, absolutely. But we are not a reductionistic body. We are way too complex to think that there is a one food item. We have to heal the metabolism. We need to fuel the metabolic pathways.
Right. Now I just thought my brain just went straight to sugar. So let's talk about sugar.
The S word.
Because that's the other thing. I noticed that, everybody says, oh, I just like to have, especially right in the evening, I crave that sugar.
Yeah.
I want to go and get a cookie.
So we make I have probably over 200 cookie recipes on my website, but they use whole foods, right? And they use nutrients. It's just called a dessert. So for example, I made a sorbet the other night. I used beets and raspberries. I use greens. I use jicama, right?
You don't add any sugar?
Sometimes I am not opposed to
white sugar?
No, God, never.
Okay.
So refined sugar, there was a study done by Stanford, 2 teaspoons refined sugar cuts your T cell count by 50% for a 2-hour period. So if you have an immune disorder, if you have inflammation, period, if you have any kind of hormone dysfunction, if you're going through menopause, if you've got weight gain midsection,
You want to stay away from that,
just
for sure.
Exactly. So there are certain natural sweeteners that I'm not opposed to, but I
like monk fruit?
If it's true monk fruit, right? If it's pure monk fruit. Same with stevia. If it's pure stevia, and stevia is grown closer to the equator, you lose the bitterness. So we have a metabolism sweet. It's a pure, all natural, 100% stevia. So it's not cut with a dextrose or an erythritol. Where we get the raw ingredient is so close to the equator, so it takes that bitterness out. I think the studies on xylitol in a birch form, not in a genetically modified corn form, have a positive outcome. So I'm not opposed to a birch xylitol, but I'll use things like black cherries, mangoes, apricots. So what I try to do is create whole foods that can. I don't say don't do desserts, right? Or even in the worst way, if a person says, I'm going out to eat, I'm going to have dessert, I go, okay, choose, something that has a healthy fat in it. I'd rather you have, I'm not a dairy fan, maybe a cheesecake, right? Over having, a bag of sweet tarts. You know what I'm saying? So we don't have the food coloring. We don't have the food dye. We don't have the straight based sugar without any fat to slow sugar delivery. And I also say, don't feel guilty about it. So the funniest text from a client that said, because I say guilt is fattening. So a text from a client the other night, actually it's probably a couple of years ago now, that said, just had a lovely cheesecake for dinner, heading to bed. I have zero guilt. I know I'm going to weigh less in the morning.
I love it.
I'm like, rock star. You know what I mean? If you're going to do it, and just let it go and move on to something.
Right.
Yeah. But nutrition is not an option. And so I think we have to get, this whole thing with Kellogg's right now, everybody boycotting Kellogg's and asking them to change the neurotoxins, the food additives, the preservatives, coloring that are used in the United States that aren't used in Europe, right? So they're boycotting Kellogg's. What do we think? This multi-billion-dollar company is just altruistically going to pull something out. We need to make sure that our federal government doesn't allow those to even be called food. If you're not sure what neurotoxins are, this is my challenge to everybody that's listening. Look at any product that is marketed to children commercially, and that is the most neurotoxic food you will find on the planet, whether that's in jellos or candies or cereals, right? There's no doubt we're poisoning our society. It's hard though to eat when you don't cook all day, every day, package all day, every day, or God forbid, like the other day, I left without my little Taylor Swift lunch pail. It's not that it's not hard. It's hard. And it's not that it doesn't take a lot of effort. It does. But that's where I'm hoping to bridge the gap, right?
How about home delivery, like meal delivery services? Would you recommend that to our patients?
Home delivery or meal services, I don't think I think there's some good ones out there. Most of the good ones seem to go out of business because the cost of the product is so expensive, right? The cost of whole real foods is so expensive, and that's just wrong. So
it's not probably the best quality.
It can be. There's been some really good ones. They just don't, what I've found over 30 years is they don't stay in business. The profit margin isn't there, right? It's much more profitable to sell you a box of crackers, right? And it'll sustain life because the brain has to have sugar. And so if you got a bunch of trans fats in there, right, it's going to make you all hyped up. And the whole thing with crackers, right? So we passed this law where we couldn't call things, so they came out, and it was in the fertility space, that they said 4 grams of trans fatty acids can inhibit fertility like significantly, like over 70%, egg quality, right? So all of these companies said, okay, how do we get our food to be trans fat free? So what they did was they say, as long as it's 0.999% trans fat per serving size, you can call it trans fat free. So all the cracker companies reduced their serving size. So instead of 12 to 18 crackers, your serving size is now like 7 to 8, right? So you eat a normal Cheez-It, you eat a couple of them, you don't eat just one. You're actually having 3 and 4 and 5 trans fatty acids in there, and you're inhibiting your endocrine function. So there's a lot of this truth in labeling things. So this is what I say. The closer that you can get, so food has to come from the earth, the sky, the sea, right? Closer you can get to either growing it yourself or patting the farmer on the back that did, right? you're going to have, so locally if you can, grow it yourself if you can. Yeah, but also make your grocery, your produce manager a friend. So I had this massive fit at our Whole Foods in my community because they changed a lot of the oils to a canola oil from an olive oil. And I said, well, you can't do this in the neighborhood that I was living in. I won't, not only will I not buy your food, but I'm going to just scream from the hilltops. And I did every day, all day. Every single thing in that Whole Foods is olive oil now. So your neighborhood advocacy matters. Your consumer dollar is more powerful than you give it value for. If you have found a product that someone talked about online and your grocery store doesn't have it, ask them to carry it for you. Many of them will give you case discounts even, right? There was a particular type of apple that I like. My particular grocery store in Colorado wasn't carrying it in an organic form. I asked them to carry it in an organic form. You just have to advocate for yourself and realize that food is the most powerful medicine that we have yet to discover.
Salt.
Salt.
A lot of our patients use extra salt to bring up their blood volume. So talk to me a little bit about salt. What do you recommend?
Right.
Good salt sources, which kind? Himalayan?
Yeah.
Pink?
So I was part of the American Salt Society. There's actually a society. I went to a conference one time I went to a conference that was all on waters, and I went to a conference that was all on salts, and it was fascinating to me actually. And the salt trade and why it was more valuable than gold. I mean, there's just a lot of history, right? And that history, the value of it is because of the impact it makes, not only in the class of hormones called mineral corticoids, right? How we regulate sodium, potassium in our body, how we regulate blood pressure, how we regulate our own steroids, right? And how that balances out with blood sugar like glucocorticoids. But salt, I don't believe, was meant to be table salt, right? I don't believe that we should do sodium chloride. I think, there's a chemical process, a bleaching process. I also think it's very powerful and unstable in that form. So I like a Celtic salt. I love Fleur de France. I love a well-ratioed salt. The Himalayan salts can be good also. And then I get a lot of docs ask me, well, what about the iodine, right? And I said, can we just do some kelp flakes and not iodinize or put iodine in our sodium chloride? I think we're approaching the body like a chemistry experiment, right? And I don't think, especially in my opinion, a body that's having dysautonomia should use something so reductionistic. I think it should have much more of a holistic application. So I love adding a salt, but I like what we would call a holistic salt, a more sea salt at least.
So give me some recommendations that you could give to our patients as far as what do you think their first step should be?
First step, honestly, was what all my friends do is I would say join our community. It's free for the first 30 days. Absolutely. Download, find your favorite foods, jump on there, ask me questions, ask anybody questions. You get tons of recipes, but don't go it alone, right? So be part of a community. I think ours is amazing. Doesn't have to be ours. But the reason why we do it for free for 30 days is because we don't want people to feel obligated to anything that isn't right for them.
So stress and sleep. Is there any nutritional recommendations you make for somebody who can't sleep? Because in this patient population, a lot of patients all over the world and have trouble with insomnia and sleeping.
Some of the biggest studies that I was able to participate, I was in the Human Nutrition and Food Science Department at Colorado State University, were trying to stabilize cortisol in an individual, because cortisol, especially when it gets inverted, right? So we're supposed to wake up in the morning, we're supposed to get a nice cortisol bump. It's supposed to stabilize, and then it's supposed to trickle down throughout the day. We can have bumps depending on our blood sugar, but the frequency, so the smaller the grazing mentality. So I always say 3 meals, 2 snacks. The grazing mentality helps to stabilize blood sugar. It also, so when we consume, right, we get sugars in our bloodstream, and our body decides how to shuttle it and distribute it. Ideally, we want to shuttle it for metabolic processing to have mitochondrial, oxygenation and ATP outcome of energy. But oftentimes there's actually an exchange in triglycerides with our adipocytes, our fat cells, right? So we take our lipids and our sugars together, we exchange them, we do an exchange, and our adipocytes or our fat cells release new triglycerides. Those are then metabolized. That is a metabolic process that you have to have a lot of energy to do. it's nutrient dependent, right? So when you're not eating, when you go for long stretches of eating, we elevate cortisol to do a process, a metabolic process called gluconeogenesis, which is like making new glucose. We have a bicep sandwich, right? We store glycogen in our muscle. We store it in the liver. Every time we do that, there's always a natural exchange, but every time we do that out of homeostasis, out of balance, it triggers cortisol. And it triggers the adrenals. That's the metabolic pathway of how we get into gluconeogenesis, right? Is we get an adrenal surge. So if you're stressed, eat 5 times a day. If you want to be more resilient to stress, eat 5 times a day. If you're happy, eat 5 times a day. Eat frequently and have nutrient diversity. Sleep is critical. Like don't cheat yourself. Don't not give yourself that opportunity. We could have 10 podcasts on sleep alone. There are metabolic things that happen that cannot happen if you don't go to sleep. I want to challenge you to do me a favor. Weigh yourself, all of you out there, before you go to bed, and weigh yourself when you wake up in the morning. I guarantee you're going to weigh less. You lose weight when you sleep.
Amazing.
Fun
a
stuff.
lot of information, Haylie. Indeed.
Thanks for interviewing me. It's
very nice.
Very cool
nice and very, this is great information. And for all our listeners, this is wonderful. Make sure you all go to the community, join the community, eat healthier, put a lot of color in your plate.
Absolutely.
One day at a time.
Absolutely. One day at a time. And you know what? The whole process should be a relief for you. And that's why we have the community. Ask us anything. I got the coolest team that are all here for the right reason. And I love them all for it. We've got a small but mighty force.
That's what it takes.
It does. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you.